Hey, so today I have a good word for you. I have the origin of the word psychiatry and how that word came to be. So I think you'll find it pretty interesting. Well, I hope so. I've got lots of references here. You can't see it on the camera, but I've got plenty to show you. So let's go straight into it. The word was actually coined in 1808 by a German physician, in those days was a doctor, called Johann Christian Reil. So it was in 1808. He wrote a paper, a German paper, and the translation here I have is Rhapsodies on the Application of Psychic Treatment Methods to Mental Disorders. And apparently the objective of his paper, what that physician thought, is he felt that there should be a more holistic approach to helping people with mental problems. Obviously, the man's not alive anymore, so I can't confirm that. I don't know whether it's exactly this, but that's what I could find on it, or that's what's available on this man. I have not read the Rhapsodies either. Anyway, so obviously it comes from the word comes from psyche, which means the soul, like in psychology, and the word iatra or aitria, probably not pronouncing it properly, another Greek word aitria, which means healing. So theoretically, what he was proposing was the healing of the soul. Right, now if you actually look at the definition of heal, I thought, let's do this properly. I have my Webster's, the second edition, which I really like. Heal is a word that hasn't really changed in meaning over the years. And we look at the word heal, it comes from the Germanic base hal, which means sound, healthy, right? And the word to heal means to make sound, well, or healthy again, to restore to health, or to cure, or get rid of a disease, or to cause a wound, sore, etc., to become closed or scarred so as to restore a healthy condition, or to free from grief, from troubles, evil, etc. So we understand by that healing is to bring back to a good condition and a healthy condition. So this gentleman obviously had some goal. Now we can probably understand why he was thinking like this when we look at what was happening at the same time. So I'm back to this book, which you can get on Internet Archive, a book written by a psychiatrist in 1956, Erwin H. Aknecht, who extols the virtue of psychiatry and how wonderful it was. And what is amazing about that book, or is amusing, is how it discusses quite shocking treatments and how wonderful they are. So here we go. What was happening at the time of Mr. Reil? So I'm going to read, this is on page 33, so you can find out in Internet Archives. And it says, the 18th century in psychiatry is unfortunately not only the century of the development of psychotherapy, but also the century of the active development of physical treatment methods which might be regarded as a sort of shock therapy. The old treatment by ducking was supplemented by the so-called Darwin chair, invented by Charles Darwin's grandfather, the physician Erasmus Darwin, 1731 to 1802. So in this chair, the insane were rotated until blood oozed from their mouth, ears, and noses. And for years, most successful cures were reported as a result of its use. I'll let you ponder on that if you think such method is a cure. Oh, but that's not the only thing that was happening. These are just examples. So next, castration and starvation cures were also employed. Old drugs such as datura and camphor were introduced once more, and the newly discovered drug digitalis was used in large quantities to treat cases of insanity as well as all other types of disease. So here's a selection of the treatments that were happening at the time that Johann Christian Reil coined the word psychiatry. And for this, cures, I love this, castration and starvation cures were also employed. I can't quite get how they even conceive of this being a cure, but I will let you decide for yourself. I think there are definitely different meanings of the word cure that are being used here, but that's certainly not my definition of cure. So at the time, psychiatrists were not called psychiatrists. They were actually called alienists. And here's a picture of 1860 German alienists. So you can see it here. Sorry about the shadow, but you can clearly see that it says alienist, and it comes from the French alienation, which was another word for mental illness or insanity, being sort of disconnected, alienated. Now, that was the name for those people. And if you look in my 1880 Collins, you will find that there is no definition. The word psychiatry does not appear because it wasn't in use. Even though it was coined by Real in 1808, it actually only began to be used towards the end of the 18th century. And we can actually also see that in the Encyclopedia Britannica. So here is this volume. And just to give you an idea, we have just the entry here. So you can see the word psyche right there. And alphabetically, I have to be careful with that, it's so thin. The next entry is psychical research. And there's no psychiatry, which would have been between those entries. So it's not in there. However, alienist is in the Encyclopedia Britannica. So if we look at here, we see alienation, and then just a bit below alienist. And here you have alienist, from Latin alienus, that which belongs to another, exterior to oneself, and it is one who specializes in the study of mental diseases, which are often included in the generic name alienation or insanity. So even by 1911, this is a 1911 encyclopedia, the word hadn't made it in there. However, here's a final reference for that one. This is my other reference book, although I've just acquired further reference books, which I'll discuss in other videos. I'm very happy about them because they tie up with all the names and the dates. But here's a little another interesting tidbit. This is on page 30. And as I explained in some other videos, psychiatry was not a recognized subject. They were alienists. They were people who looked after asylums, lunatic asylums. And just as a side note, completely as a side thing, I was pondering on that the other day. And if you imagine people with epilepsy, so I don't know if you've ever seen somebody having an epileptic fit in front of you. I have, and it is quite scary, you know, especially some of the full blown fits. And I think to myself, you know, how many people throughout history, or at least in Europe, were epileptic and were having fits? And this would have been regarded as, I don't know, being possessed or having some sort of mental disease. And I was thinking, God, how many people would have wound up in asylums when there was something really wrong with them medically? You know, like seizures, you know, problem with seizures, fits, you know, real medical situations. So anyway, I digress, but I was thinking about that. So at the time, all the way up to 1900, psychiatry just was not considered any sort of medical subject. And I have to make more posts on this because it's very specific. They were not doctors, and the medical profession did not really accept those people for obvious reasons. I've read to you the sort of treatment they were giving to lunatics or so-called lunatics. And if you think those kind of cures were medically so empowering and really healing the person, then right. Anyway, there was in 1891, there was a professor of psychiatry at the University of Jena, so Germany, obviously, again. He was called Otto Binswanger. And that's how it's written. Or maybe it's Binswanger. And anyway, among many things he did, one thing he did do was fight long and hard for the establishment of psychiatry as a recognized medical discipline. This was in Germany. And finally, in 1901, it was accredited as an official medical subject for which one could be called a doctor. They were not called doctors before then. 1901. And keeping in mind that 1902, Rockefeller then started funding the American Education Board for education and then psychiatry. And then you have the Cosmo clubs and the Century clubs throughout the 1900s dealing with mind control projects. So it's very interesting date-wise, but I thought it would be important to understand the dates. So up until 1901, only in 1901 in Germany was psychiatry recognized as anything official. A lot more stories before and a lot more after, but we'll take it up bit by bit. So here you go. Here's the original definition of the word psychiatry. And perhaps Johann Rail came up with that idea because he felt that people should be truly healed. And perhaps what he was observing at the time was not healing, of course, and not cure either. Who knows? We'll never know exactly what he thought.